Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine 18. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome or welcome back. I am here for my end of month recap video of some of what I've been up to, my favorites, decks, books, and other fun things for May 2021. So I wanted to start by sharing a little bit of some of the learning that I've been doing this month. And then from there, I'll get into decks, books, and the animal card of the month at the end. So I've been doing a couple of courses this month. One is that I'm taking the core class in the Reclaiming Tradition of Witchcraft, which is called Elements of Magic. I've shown this book before, Elements of Magic, edited by Jane Meredith and G'day Parma. And this anthology is based on this core course. And so I've had this sitting on my book stack of joy for quite some time, but when I found out that my friend Cara, who's also a YouTube creator at CuteWitch772, was going to be co-teaching this course with some folks from Reclaiming Pittsburgh, and it was going to be offered online over Zoom, I wanted to sign up right away, and I figured I would work through this book as I took that course. And it's a 6-week course that's once a week. And so far, I'm really enjoying it. I will have more to say, I'm sure, once we're finished. So far, we've had 4 weeks out of the 6. We still have, and it's organized by element, so we still have Earth Week and Spirit Week left to work through. And it's really been interesting for me as somebody who's very much a solitary practitioner of my spiritual and religious path, to be working with a group in this way. And I feel like I've learned a lot already in terms of different ways of working with the elements in my very already elemental practice. So I'm really enjoying this book and the class. If you're interested in a review of this book, Cara has a great one on their channel. I may do a book review as well on that book, we'll see. The other course that I've been working my way through is called Omens, Oracles, and Prophecies, and it's an online module offered through edX, which is edX.org. I'll link the specific course below. It's offered through HarvardX, and I first learned of this course not too long ago, maybe a week ago, from a comment someone left on a YouTube video. I think it was on Tom Benjamin's channel. Someone had mentioned this. And it sounded interesting to me, so I put it into a search engine, thought, we'll see what this is about. And before you know it, I was signed up. So for folks who don't know edX.org, this is a website that hosts all kinds of different courses offered all online by different universities. And you can take the courses for free as kind of an audit option, or you can pay, what I think is ultimately a really small per course fee. It varies a little bit. And with that, you can have your identity verified and have a test at the end and have a certificate to show that you've completed it. But I believe the content is really the same whether you pay or whether you don't. And so this course, Omens, Oracles, and Prophecies, is part of a larger set of courses related to prediction throughout history. And this one looks at different forms of divination. So there's a section on tarot, there's a section on tea leaf reading entrails, there's astrology in a couple of different contexts. The Mayan calendar is in there. There's Ifa, there's augury, there is the Oracle at Delphi. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of divination covered in there, and it's really interesting. And it's a mix of kind of short sections of text and short videos to watch. So I'm really enjoying this course. So do check it out if you're interested in learning about some different kinds of divination, and there's suggestion for further reading online as well. So it's a great resource for sure. Those are the 2 classes I've been doing. I have a couple of decks that are new to me this month that I thought I would share with you. One that I just posted a video of is, of course, the Page of Cats Tarot, and it's still in order since I just filmed my walkthrough. This is a photography-based deck by Tina, who we know as Queen of Wands on Instagram, who's the creator of 2 of my favorite decks, Naturescapes and the Tarot of Architectural Objects. And she was kind enough to send me this deck to have a look at, and I'm already, of course, in love with these cats. This is a hug deck for me already, and of course it is right to the top of the list in cuteness factor for decks in my collection, so I've been really enjoying flipping through that one. I've only had it for like a very few days, so I haven't really done much reading with the deck yet, but I love it. The other deck that I just recently received, again, I haven't really done any readings with this one, brand new to me this month, is the Hoodoo Tarot by Tiana Lee McQuillar. These are the backs, and this is the southern part, dropping cards, the southern part of the United States there is on the back of the deck, and it comes with this very good big guidebook with one of my favorite features, a very big bibliography at the end. So what I've been working with this deck so far is really just looking through this bibliography, reading a bit of the introductory material in the guidebook, and looking at some of these sources, since this is very, very new to me. This is a deck that I had admired online, and for the past several weeks, I guess, before I ordered this deck, it was one that kept catching my eye. Sometimes on Instagram there'll be that one deck that just keeps catching your eye, and every time someone posts a picture of a reading that includes it, your eye just gets drawn to it. I have this experience anyway, and this was that deck, and it just kept really standing out to me, something about it. And it's beautiful, the artwork is amazing. And then, as it turns out, for the next tarot deck study, Kim at Abundant Life Tarot is featuring this deck. So I will link below to Kim's channel and website, where you can learn more about the tarot deck study and the plans for tarot deck study with this particular deck. And I knew from having seen the little bits that I had seen of this deck that it was the kind of deck that, were I to add it to my collection, I would want to really dedicate some time to getting to know the deck, getting to know the historical aspects that relate to the deck. So the fact that that Kim chose it for the deck study, I was really, really excited, and I thought, this is just, this deck keeps jumping out at me online as a deck that is just stunning, and now there's this great opportunity to learn about and explore the deck in conversation with others. That's it. Like, what better time to get to know this deck? So I'm really, really excited about this, and I will try to remember to link below. I just watched a great, quite long interview with Tiana Lee McQuillar, the creator of the Hoodoo Tarot, and it was really, really good interview right here on YouTube, so I will try to link that one. I was a little bit familiar with her work before from a book she wrote on astrology and water houses specifically, but not too familiar, so I will link that interview if you're interested. It's very much worth a watch. Decks I've worked with most this month. Not so much these two decks I just mentioned, the Hoodoo Tarot and the Page of Cats, because they're both very, very, very new again, so I haven't really been reading with them over the course of the month. The decks I have been reading with this month the most are one that is stuck in its bag, the Gaian Tarot, and I love this deck. It is such a special deck, I think, and this is the Llewellyn edition, which I received as a very kind, very generous gift that I am immensely thankful for. This is a wonderful deck to read with. The guidebook is great. I love that this deck is diverse, and I really appreciate actually that this deck has age diversity. I feel like a lot of decks you know, even decks that are diverse in other respects, maybe diverse in terms of, you know, ethnicity, or maybe have some LGBT representation, are not so representative when it comes to the wide range of ages. And this deck is from infants to elders. And I love that about the Gaian Tarot. So, and it feels a bit like a very springy deck to me as well. So it's been a perfect one to be working with this month. The other tarot deck I've worked with the most this month is not one that was new to me this month, but it is a deck that I love and I anticipate continuing to work with, you know, ongoingly. And that is the Many Queens Tarot by Letty Jane Ranikamp. Black and white, feminist deck. And I love this deck. I love the curvaceous body shapes in this tarot deck. I love the body hair in this tarot deck. There's a lot of leg hair. Really appreciate that one. And this is a deck that I have been working with around body acceptance and self-love, particularly as bathing suit season is upon us, which I'm very excited about. I love summer. And I bought the first bikini I've owned in about 20 years. So definitely some self-love work happening that this deck has been great for. And that's the Many Queens Tarot. And for Oracle decks, I shared this deck in a walkthrough recently, but one that I have not been able to put down since I got it is this little black and white deck, and it's called L'Oracle des Vieilles Dames, the Oracle of Old Ladies, and it's by Athénée Fondrevel, and this deck is fabulous. La Planteuse, the planter. So I have a walkthrough of this deck. The titles are in French. My walkthrough is not in French. And you get a little guidebook that has English text as well. Clairvoyante, the clairvoyant, superheroine. And this deck is a, you know, feminist celebration of elders and crones, and I think that it's fabulous. And this deck just brings me joy. It's such a special one. So this one was, you know, one that I had really had my eye on for some of that self-love work alongside the Many Queens Tarot, especially. They look great together as a black and white deck, but really this deck can go with any other, in my opinion. Fantastic. So that's L'Oracle des Vieilles Dames, the Oracle of Old Ladies. And again, I have a walkthrough in English of the deck, because I will mention something that I mentioned in my walkthrough of that deck. There is an English language pamphlet that comes with it with little meanings for each of the cards. However, the card titles are in French in both booklets. There's a little French booklet and an English one, but the titles are consistently French, both in the booklets and on the cards. So in my walkthrough, I go through and share the titles in English as well. So I thought that that would be useful, I hope. So those are the decks that I've been working with. Okay, so books I've read this month. I read 10 books, and I had a really good reading month, and I'm excited to talk about them all with you. And I have quite a few hard copies to show you, which is probably more exciting than when I'm just talking about ebooks. But, you know, ebooks are environmentally friendly, so I like to read ebooks. They're also cheaper. So 10 books, and I'm not going to put them in any particular order, but, you know, here they are. The first book that I wanted to mention was one that I read in Seiji, the Artisan Geeks book club. I'll link Seiji's Patreon below. Seiji is also the Artisan Geek on YouTube. a book reviewing channel. And in the Diverse Classics Book Club, we have a different book every month, and it's voted on by the participants. And the book that won for May was Notes of the Crocodile by Qiu Miaojin. And Qiu Miaojin was a Taiwanese lesbian author. She died of suicide very young, in her late 20s. And Notes of the Crocodile was written and published just before her death. So it was published in 1994. And it is set in Taiwan. And it's an interesting book. It's almost a collection of vignettes. It's not linear. It's not particularly plot focused. It's very much interior reflection and character development. And it explores this protagonist's experiences with homophobia, and particularly with internalized homophobia, as it follows a lesbian protagonist through university and a little bit of her life after university and some of her relationships. And it was a very affecting read, particularly the way that internalized homophobia and anxiety and depression were explored in this particular book. The closest thing that I could compare it to that I've read would maybe be The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. They're not really similar, but like in terms of its effect on me as a reader, similar. And so I was really glad to read this book because I've been interested in reading more LGBT literature from around the world that is not just North American or European. And so the book club's been really great for that, because both this month's book and the book that's been picked for next month as well fall into this category. And so I'm really enjoying the Diverse Classics Book Club for that. And relevant to mention, since it's Pride Month next month. So that's Notes of the Crocodile. Very intense read, but definitely one that I'm glad that I read. The next one would be The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. And the book description for The Jasmine Throne, which I thought I would just read because I think it's a good sum up that's not too spoilery, is the beginning of a new trilogy set in a world inspired by the history and epics of India, in which a captive princess and a maidservant in possession of forbidden magic become unlikely allies on a dark journey to save their empire from the princess's traitor brother. I loved this book. I've never read anything by Tasha Suri before, but I am so excited that The Jasmine Throne is a trilogy. I loved the queer female main character representation. I loved the world building. This was one of several books, 3 of the books I read this month, that all satisfy my card that I chose for May to read a sci-fi fantasy with an Asian protagonist. This is not focusing for whatever reason today. But The Jasmine Throne was so good. So good. I've put my Goodreads link below where I review lots of books, so you can see my review of that and all of these other books there. But I gave it 5 stars. I can't wait to read more Tasha Suri. I can't wait to continue the trilogy. I'm going to have to wait a while since this was an advanced reader copy, of The Jasmine Throne, which is not actually published yet. So it is coming soon, though. Keep an eye out for it because it was fantastic. The next book that I'll mention was a short novella, which also falls into sci-fi fantasy with an Asian protagonist category, and that was The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water by Zen Cho. What a beautiful book title. The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water. And this is another book that I was really attracted to, based not only on, it has a beautiful cover, but also because the description on Zen Cho's website, and the description of the book is that this book is a tale of nuns and bandits, hijinks, and secret histories in an Wuxia take on emergency Malaya. So this I thought was going to be really interesting, and it was. I I don't know that wuxia would be how I would have described it, because that brings to mind really action-packed, like martial arts books. And like, I haven't read very many of these, but it wasn't what I expected based on that definition at all. It's very much a character development, relationship, dynamic focused kind of novella, not so much martial arts action-packed novella, which is fine. It's not even a criticism. It's just maybe the description didn't quite, in my opinion, suit the book. This book also had LGBT representation in it, which I do appreciate, though I will say that I think that there are some issues with the trans representation in this book, particularly the way in which a instance of a kind of reveal of the fact that one of the characters is in fact trans is handled is not great. That said, you should definitely read trans and non-binary book reviewers' takes on that, because as a cis reader, I'm not, the authoritative voice on, the status of that representation, but there was definitely some things that I thought were troublesome from my perspective anyway. But the plot was good and is beautifully written though. So I did enjoy that. The third one that also satisfied this card seemed to just, I kind of went on my wish list and to read list and found anything that fit in this card. I just read them all, or a lot of them. The next one was Fireheart Tiger by Aliette de Bodard, and Fireheart Tiger has a setting that is inspired by pre-colonial Vietnam. It is a fantasy, so it's a fictionalized version of it. But the setting was really well developed in this book. Fireheart Tiger is also a novella, so very short. If anything, my criticism of Fireheart Tiger would be that I think it actually needed more space. It had a lot going on in terms of kind of colonial politicking and resistance, as well as the development of interpersonal relationships, as well as a supernatural element as well. And I think that more room to breathe would have been helpful for Fireheart Tiger, but overall, I really enjoyed it, and I've read Aliette de Bodard before, and I will again, and I thought that it was great. So the other books that I picked for my cards, and as a reminder, these are the TBR cards created by Jessie of Bowties and Books here on YouTube and on Instagram as well. The next card that I had was a card to read a book by an Indigenous author. And so for that book, I decided to go nonfiction, and I picked this book, which is called Michisagig Nishnabeg. This is our territory. And in choosing this book, I was going close to home, because the author of this book, lives and works very close to where I live and work. So this is a written down account from the oral tradition, and it's Michisagig Nishnabeg people's oral tradition of the history of these territories. And so the back of the book mentions, in his own words, the author shares the history of the Michisagig Nishnabeg, discussing origin stories, alliances, diplomacy, resistance, and relations to the lands and waters in the homelands. And 5 stars. This book is really, really important, particularly I would say for folks who live, who live in Ontario, who live in this region of Ontario specifically, because of course, a lot of what we learn in public school systems and kind of quote unquote official accounts of histories is woefully lacking, is downright false in many cases. The history of colonialism here is often not represented accurately or well or thoroughly, and sometimes hardly at all in our school system. So learning from Indigenous authors who are sharing this history and this knowledge is really, really important, and I really appreciate this book so much. So that was fantastic. Another card I picked was the Toshi Onyebuchi card, which says a work of Afrofuturism. Here I kind of went adjacent to the card, and instead of reading a work of Afrofuturism, which means technically I cheated, I read a work called Afrofuturism, The World of Black Sci-Fi and Fantasy Culture by Watasha L. Womack. And this was good. This is obviously a nonfiction, and the back of the book describes it as a hip, accessible primer to the music, literature, and art of Afrofuturism. This book is a couple years old now, I think. When were you published? 2013. I would love an updated version of this because I feel like Janelle Monáe's Dirty Computer, would fit into this book, and the Black Panther film, and there's just so many contemporary examples that have kind of been produced since 2013 that I would love the author's analysis of. But I really enjoyed this because while I would say that I am reasonably familiar with Afrofuturism in the context of sci-fi fantasy literature, other areas like music and performance art and fine arts, I am not at all. So I ended up making just lists, lists of things in pencil in the back of the book of things that I wanted to check out or learn more about. Then there's a great bibliography and further reading section. I really enjoyed the accounts of how Afrofuturism comes to be taught in universities and colleges, and its kind of formation as a community of inquirers and scholars and thinkers and students, which I wasn't familiar with before. So I really liked this book a lot. And the last card that I got was telephone. Friend picks a word and you read a book with that word in the title. So my friend Allie, who's kind of goth, picked the word dark, and the book that I picked was The Disordered Cosmos, A Journey into Dark Matter, Space, Time, and Dreams Deferred by Dr. Chanda Prescott-Weinstein. And this book was so good. This was one that was on my Goodreads, flagged it as a want to read book. And so when I got the word dark, I just looked at what books would fit that and found this one. And I'll just read, the first sentence from the inside of the jacket of the book. In The Disordered Cosmos, Dr. Chanda Prescott-Weinstein shares her love for physics, from the standard model of particle physics and what lies beyond it, to the physics of melanin and skin, to the latest theories of dark matter, all with a new spin informed by history, politics, and the wisdom of Star Trek. One of fewer than 100 Black American women to earn a PhD from a department of physics, Prescott-Weinstein presents a vision of the universe that is vibrant, buoyantly non-traditional, and grounded in Black feminist lineages. This was so good. I will say, the first section of this book is really getting into physics, and that part was extremely difficult for me as somebody with a background in the humanities. I have taken philosophy of science, but I have never taken any course related to natural sciences of any kind or math since high school. So some of the sections at the very beginning on different kinds of particles and space-time and things like this were very hard for me to get through. This took me a significant amount of time. This is the most recent one that I've read on this list. But the way that the author talks about university culture and the culture of publish or perish and the politics of university departments and the politics of so-called diversity and equity and inclusion work in post-secondary settings were issues that I really care about as somebody who works in the university, and I really appreciated her analysis a lot. And her discussions toward the end go more into the politics of science. So the ways that historically and ongoingly scientists' work is bound up with the military-industrial complex, for example, with climate change. And this is great. And the reading list at the end is great. There's, a section of footnotes for each chapter. And I really, really enjoyed reading this. Again, the first sections, I struggled. I feel like I learned a lot, but I also feel like quite a lot probably went over my head. But her analysis is really, really interesting. And I'm really glad that I read this book. And I recommend it, for sure. Okay, 3 more books. I read, way back near the beginning of the month, I read a book that's been on my stack of joy for a while, and that is Saladin Ahmed's Throne of the Crescent Moon. And this one follows a protagonist named Dr. Abdullah Maqsood, who is a ghoul hunter, and he's going on a, what might be one last adventure. He is an older protagonist, which I appreciate, definitely underrepresented, who's kind of wondering why he hasn't retired yet for a lot of the book. And there are some things that I really liked about this book. There's a lot of interesting dynamics between him and his much younger and much more kind of rigid apprentice, whereas he's much more relaxed protagonist. I feel like the world building and the city in the book was really interesting. And yeah, it was a fun fantasy adventure, and I liked it a lot. I will mention, it says that it's book 1 of a trilogy. As far as I can tell, it is the only book out. So if there is a trilogy, it is forthcoming. I will also just mention about this one, because it is right at the beginning. On my Goodreads, I put content warnings where applicable for books. This book does open with a very graphic torture scene as the first page, first couple of pages. The whole book is not like that. It does come up a couple of times. There are a couple of scenes that are very much overtly graphically violent, but most of the book is not like the 2 pages at the beginning. So if you pick up the book, that is something to be aware of. But I enjoyed this one. Oh, okay. Second last book I'll mention. I've probably mentioned before, probably already know this. I am a big fan of Murderbot. Murderbot book series by Martha Wells. There are now 6 books in the Murderbot series. 5 of them are novellas, and then one of them, which is the 5th in the series in terms of its release order, is a novel. And this month, the 6th book, called Fugitive Telemetry, came out, and I read it immediately. And it's a novella like the early ones were, and me and my spouse both read them at the same time, and we read the 6th book together, so we would have to keep checking in about page number to make sure that nobody spoiled it for anybody else. And Fugitive Telemetry was so fun, 5 stars. I love Murderbot. I love the Murderbot series. I love Murderbot as a narrator. Love it. And Fugitive Telemetry is basically kind of a locked door, or like a locked room mystery on a space station, but with Murderbot investigating. If you haven't read the Murderbot series, do check it out. Do not start with the 6th book, Fugitive Telemetry, though, because I think that while the plot is self-contained, the characters' relationships are very much informed by prior books, and I don't think that the 6th book will read very well if you haven't read the others, or at least some of the others. But Murderbot is fantastic. Last book for May, I think. I'm just looking at the time here. Last book for May, I read Becoming Animal: An Earthly Cosmology by David Abram. This is a book I've also had on my stack for a while. My family got me this for Christmas, and I'm finally reading it now. And so one of the sentences on the back of the book here, the book is described as a startling exploration of our human entanglement with the rest of nature. And the back of the book says that his writing subverts the distance between humans and the environment, drawing readers closer to their animal senses in order to explore from within the elemental kinship between the human body and the breathing earth. This was interesting. I feel like I expected it to be almost more philosophical, theoretical than a lot of it was. There was some of that, but a lot of this was just really beautiful nature writing, which I very much enjoyed. And Abram definitely has a kind of pantheist / animist sensibility, which I can resonate with for sure. And I really liked a lot of what he had to say. A lot of really interesting reflections on nature, on our relationship with nature as humans, our tendency to devalue the body as opposed to the spirit and to dichotomize those. I share his criticism of that. And just really beautiful descriptions of nature. He does, I will say, if I were to criticize this book, there are definitely some generalizations in here about kind of indigenous cultures or traditional cultures, just, talked about generically. But I will also say that he is aware of that being an issue. And he speaks to the issue of generalizing and generalizing needing to be cautious quite explicitly. So I appreciated that as well. I will definitely pick up his other book based on having enjoyed this one. That is all my reading for May 2021. So what's left as I look around my crowded desk of stuff is to share the animal of the month for May. So in my last video, I chose the animal for May and I picked the Arabian camel. This is from the Flora and Fauna of Africa by Jessie Jumanji. And the message there is: be patient and persistent in your journey. You are on the right path. Be sure to care for yourself first so that you can care for others. And I love this deck. I've mentioned before, that as soon as I got this deck, I knew it would be one of my favorite animal decks. I have fallen in love with it very quickly. Earlier this month, I went and pre-ordered Afro Tarot 2 by Jessie Jumanji as well. This deck is amazing. So for a message from the Arabian camel is also called the dromedary camel. It's the camel that has one hump, as you can see, as opposed to the Bactrian camel, which has two. And I had a bit of a head start on thinking about camel because I am in my friend T's Patreon. T is Cosmic Creeper here on YouTube. I'll link T's Patreon below as well. And we have an animal of the month that T chooses in there, and camel had already been picked in an earlier month when I was in the Patreon. So I had a camel-inspired tarot spread that T made to work with, and I'm not going to share the spread because it's not my intellectual property. It's T's. If you would like to see it, you can do it in the Patreon. But it focuses thematically on being on a journey and kind of thinking about the journey as opposed to the destination as a theme for camel. And I think that makes a lot of sense for the Arabian camel, which travels very, very long distances. And in terms of thinking about this animal with this message about being persistent in a journey and also about caring for yourself, it was a bit different having an animal that, and a message. Before this deck, I was drawing from a deck that didn't really have a message on the card. So that kind of informed me to learn something interesting about the Arabian camel, also known as dromedary camel, is that it has very, very good sense of vision, very, very good sense of smell. So you think about them journeying in mostly deserts and needing to both be able to see long distances and also be able to detect things that might blend in the desert environment. The camel is very much adapted to do that. And this kind of camel, the dromedary camel, I didn't know, has not really been a wild animal for a very long time, like millennia. It is a domesticated animal. And thinking about this caring for yourself first, what I feel like that I learned from camel this month really is about the importance of kind of self-maintenance, self-regulation. I don't like the word regulation. I want to find a better phrase for self-regulation because I don't like that phrase. Self-moderation, because in terms of the camel's ability to travel long distances, the camel is able to control aspects of its body that most animals can't very, very effectively. So in terms of having particular bodily adaptations that allow it really to control its bodily temperature, to make sure that its brain doesn't get overheated, the camel is very well adapted. The camel can control its level of hydration. It can go a very, very long time without water, much longer than kind of the 3 days that we think of for humans. And it is able to lose a huge percentage of its water weight and survive. And it's pretty incredible in that respect. And it also has, of course, the hump, which is made out of fat predominantly, which allows it to store that fat, to have extra energy in case that it needs it on those long journeys. So thinking about both being kind of prepared and also adapting and developing the ability to respond to your environment in the way that you need to is, I think, a good message of the Arabian camel. So with that, I want to put Arabian camel to one side, and I've also got giraffe to one side since I've already had giraffe this year, and I thought that we would pick another animal from the flora and fauna of Africa. What animal should I learn about and explore in June 2021? This deck is a really, really good shuffler. So smooth. Okay. Atlas bear. I don't know anything about Atlas bear. Forsythia is the plant that is depicted with Atlas bear. The message of Atlas bear here on the card is take charge. Use your mental and physical strength to overcome adversity. Protect and cherish what you love. Atlas bear. I certainly know about some kinds of bears. We're at the time of year where I live that it is frequently a headline in the local newspaper that there have been bears in the city not too far from where I live. We have small black bears. They're usually not in the city, but they do come around this time of year. But I'm looking forward to learning about Atlas bear, which I'm not familiar with. So that will be the animal. And I will pick some Bow Ties and Books TBR cards for the month of June. I'm going to put May's cards back in because, you know, all of these prompts you could find lots and lots of books. I will say that I'm planning to do a lot of reading of 2S LGBTQ plus books for June, for Pride Month. So the cards that I draw from here, I will probably be kind of filtering through that lens as well. If you have any ideas about Pride Month content that you would like to see with me, please do mention it in the comments if there's anything really that you'd be interested in. I'm still kind of thinking about what that might look like. And I don't actually have my dice with me, which I usually roll the dice to see how many of these to pick, because I was playing Dungeons and Dragons the other day online. So my dice are elsewhere. But I'm going to shuffle, and I think I'm just going to pick 3. 3 feels like a good number of TBR cards. So what 3 prompts should inform my reading in June? Okay. Okay. Oh dear. This is one of these. I have no clue what I'm going to do. Yeah, okay. The first one, which is great, is an Own Voices book centering a Muslim family. So a book by a Muslim author that features a Muslim family. Okay, I can do that. Get graphic. An Own Voices book or graphic novel. It will be a book. I almost never read graphic novels. With a neurodiverse protagonist. I can do that. The one that I laughed at, that I don't know how I'm going to do this. Copycat. A book that matches your current outfit. So, I'm wearing a plain black skirt and this tank top. And I don't know what... The picture shows a book that the cover is the same title as the top. So I guess I'm going to be looking for a book cover that has maroon and black. This is why these are fun. It makes you have to think and find some books that you might not otherwise have picked. So this should be interesting. Stay tuned for June's recap to see what I've come up with for these prompts. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you all a great weekend, a great week. Happy June, and I'll see you all soon. Have a good one.